Hello everyone. Let's begin with one more literary term concerned with poetry, that is ballad. B-A-L-L-A-D. See, when we talk of ballad, one thing we must remember that in its initial phase, ballads were not meant to be written. It was an oral form, and in that way you can say that ballads are the oldest form of poetry. Okay, so when this was not meant to be written, it means it used to have oral trend. Okay, and as you know, when you trace the history of writing, you will find that how before writing took its existence, how there was the trend of, you can say, how there was the culture of transmission, the stories from mouth to ear. So that was the practice for the long time before the introduction of writing. So you can say that ballad was the kind of endeavor for the same practice, in the same tradition. So when this ballad is very much related with the initiation of writing civilization, then you must know how this was something very much uprooted with the folks, Folks. Okay, so when we talk of ballad, there we can think of popular ballad or folk ballad in the beginning. Okay, popular ballad or folk ballad, Folk. I think you have heard the term folk literature, or you are aware of folk song, folk dance. In Hindi that is known as lok geet or lok nritya. So in a way you can translate ballad as lok geet, because it's kind of folk song. Okay, I'll tell you how to correlate this ballad with some of our folk songs, if you are aware regarding those. So in a nutshell, when you have to think of popular ballad or folk ballad, you can say that it's a song transmitted orally which tells a story. Clear? So the first thing is, it's a song. It's the form of a lyric, the poetry which can be sung, the poem which can be sung. The second thing, transmitted orally, so from mouth to ear. Clear? And the third thing, it tells a story, so a kind of narration is there. So popular or folk ballad is a song transmitted orally which tells a story. And in that manner, when you talk of this ballad, the ballads are the narrative species of folk songs. So in fact, ballads are folk songs, and in especially those folk songs which are concerned with the narratives, narration, which originate and communicated orally. So you can think of the oral tradition. Why was there not writing introduced till the certain period? Because at that very time we can think of the people, they were not literate, they were illiterate or partly literate. So this form of literature, this form that is called ballad, was very much used, was originated among those illiterate people or partly literate people. So when you trace the origin, you have to go to those people who were illiterate or partly literate after some time. Clear? In all probability, the initial version of a ballad was composed by a single author, unknown author. When we trace, then we can find out that ballad of course was initiated by a single author, and with the passage of time, when it went from one person to other, it got changed. As you know very well that how a certain thing is said by a person, and the other person who listens that, and when he says the same thing to the third person, he mixes something of his own. So the form of the content gets slightly changed. Okay? Each singer, since this is a form of song, each singer who learns and repeats an oral ballad is apt to introduce changes in both the text and the tune. Clear? Because that thing is to be listened and then to be sung. So it's very natural that some changes might take place in the text and also in the tune, because this is a song. So tune can also be changed with the particular persons, with individuals. And that is why the ballad, which was a single form by a single author, as it is assumed, it got varied, and nowadays we can find its variant forms. We'll talk about those variant forms, how different types of ballads are there. So originally when we talk of ballad, we talk of folk ballad or popular ballad. Okay? And when we talk of this popular ballad, typically means more often, as we find this Popular ballad is dramatic. Dramatic. Why dramatic? Because of the sudden introduction of the thing or the narrative. A very abrupt one. Abrupt one means something which you cannot predict. Okay? This does not begin with the beginning. Generally, it begins with the end. When you talk of epic, in epic we have one way of beginning it is media res. In media res. MEDIARES means from the middle. But here what do we have? It's generally begin with the end. Means a dramatic one. When you start with the ballad, you find as if many things have been told earlier and now you are in a very later stage. So typically the popular ballad is dramatic, condensed. Condensed means compact, as if many things are said in few words. So dramatic, condensed and impersonal. Mind it. Impersonal means personal attitude of the singer or the poet is not very much involved there. The narrator begins with the climactic episode. See, climactic means something which is related with climax. Okay? So the narrator begins with the climactic episode, tells the story tersely in action and dialogue. Mind it, everything are important. I'll tell you some of the traits. Tells the story tersely in action and dialogue, sometimes by means of dialogue alone. See here, we can talk of one folk song that exists in today's scenario of India as well. There is something called Biraha. Have you heard its name? Biraha? That Biraha actually has taken its origin from the Hindi term Viraha. And that Viraha which was depicted regarding the Viraha or the separation of gopis from Sri Krishna. So actually that form of Biraha, that Viraha, was started from that very scenario, that very event, going of Sri Krishna, leaving gopis and Radha. Okay, with the passage of time it also got changed, and nowadays as we have this form Biraha, if you listen, you will find this can be the best example of ballad, that how in poetry you find narration of events. You find that how sometimes just dialogues are being delivered as if two people are conversing, but conversing in poetry, in poem, in poetic form. Okay? And sometimes action is also being told by the narrator. And you see how beautifully, how through action, while narrating the Biraha singer, they uses different type of gestures. So I hope this Biraha, the understanding of Biraha, can make you understand the concept of ballad very well. Okay. So here we find the narrator begins with the climactic episode, tells the story tersely in action and dialogue, and tells it without self-reference or the expression of personal attitude or feelings. Self-reference is not there, personal attitude is not very much involved there. And it's very necessary for the beauty of the literature, for the beauty of the art. Suppose a person who is singing Biraha, if he has to talk of some episode of Ramayana, you will not find that person is having a side, whether he is appreciating Ram or Ravan. You will find that how that person takes the dialogues with the full energy and just delivers it. You will not find that as if he is appreciating Ram, and while talking of Ravan, he is, contradicting him, or he is opposing him, or he is not appreciating his words and dialogues and action. So impersonal touch is there, no personal involvement of attitude or the feeling. Let's talk of some of the so till now the things those I told you was from M.H. Abrams, and even further we'll tell you the most content from M.H. Abrams, but something that I found very clearly and interesting there in J. Cudden, and that is the common traits of ballad, and that will make you understand the whole concept of ballad. Okay, and you should remember these points at least while talking of ballad. The first one is the beginning is often abrupt, so you cannot predict. Okay, often abrupt. The second thing is, as I told you earlier also, the story is told through dialogue and action. Okay. The third one is the language is simple or folksy. Folksy, that is Folksy. Of course, we are dealing with folk literature, folk song, then language is that much simple, that is very much folksy. And that's why, when you talk of Biraha, generally in UP and Bihar culture, the people speak Bhojpuri, so you find that Biraha, not in Hindi, but in Bhojpuri, and sometimes also in Hindi. The fourth trait of ballad is the theme is often tragic. So mostly the theme is tragic. Though comic ballads do exist. So comic ballads are also there. Fifth one is it contains a refrain repeated several times. So we'll have to know what the refrain is. A refrain. It contains a refrain repeated several times. Okay, we'll talk of refrain. Let me give you some example of ballad at least. See, when we talk of ballad, and if we are not talking of Robin Hood ballads, it means we are missing something. Robin Hood ballads, because this was something which existed from the beginning of the ballads. Have you heard about Robin Hood? The story of a person who used to rob the rich people and used to distribute those robbed materials among poors. One very important anthology of ballad, something of utmost importance, is the English and Scottish popular ballads. The name of that anthology, you understand, collection of poems. The name of that anthology was the English and Scottish popular ballads, and it was by F.J. Child. So he edited that anthology. Anthology is not written, it is edited, because it is the collection of several writings. Okay, so as you have known that refrain is an important concern here in ballad, because the fifth common trait of ballad is it contains a refrain, and since this is refrain, that is repeated several times. So what is refrain? A refrain is a line or part of a line, okay, or even single word. A line, you can start with that, a word or a line or part of a line or a group of lines which is repeated in the course of a poem, okay. So some line or the word or the group of line, when that is repeated in the course of the poem, you can say that this is the refrain. In the course of poem, sometimes with a slight changes, and usually at the end of each stanza, okay, as you find in several songs there, some line that is being repeated again and again in the end of each stanzas. That's called refrain. The refrain occurs in many ballads. Say, while talking of ballad, you have to talk of refrain. While talking of refrain, you will have to talk of ballad. So the refrain occurs in many ballads and work poems and is frequent element in Elizabethan songs. So refrain is, you can say, a technical device, poetical device in songs, and here we find it in Elizabethan songs. The songs written in the period of Elizabeth, in the era of Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, who served the country, England, from 1558 to 1603. Where it may be merely a non-verbal career, of the melodic line. So it's not important that refrain always has some meaning, okay, some verbal concern. So meaning is not important there. What is important? Just for carrying the melodic line, just for carrying the melody in the poem. Okay? As we have one example from Shakespeare, his poem, that is, it was a lover and his lass, Lass. What is the meaning of lass? Girl. It was a lover and his lass. And there we find one refrain, and that is, with a hey and ho and hey, noni no. So when you find this with a hey and ho and a hey noni no repeated several times, then you can understand very easily that this is a refrain there in the poem. Okay? And as I talked of single word, there is a very beautiful example by Edgar Allan Poe. He wrote one very good poem that is called The Raven. You understand raven? A kind of crow. So that's a very beautiful poem by Edgar Allan Poe. And there you find a word, nevermore, and this word echoes several times in the poem, nevermore, nevermore. So that's the refrain there. I hope now you have developed a very good concept of ballad. Okay, let's move further. See, while talking of ballad, we must understand that, as I told you, that variant forms are there. So as we talked of popular ballad or folk ballad, we'll have to talk of broadside ballad and literary ballad. And something of our concern mainly today should be, when we talk of ballad, that is literary ballad. So the many more examples that I'll give you will be from literary ballad. Okay, let's talk of ballad Estanza first. What is ballad Estanza? So as you have known till, see, initially, as it was not composed with the purpose of writing, but when it came into writing, a certain form was developed. Okay, a certain form of writing poetry that is to be sung was developed, and it was known as ballad stanza. Okay, the most common stanza form, that is of ballad. This is very most common stanza form, which is a quatrain. Quatrain, you understand? A stanza of 4 lines. A quatrain in alternate 4 and 3 stress lines. What does it mean? 4 and 3 stress lines? Stress. 4 and 3 stress lines. Stress lines should not be pronounced at the same time, otherwise you will be confused in the meaning. So a quatrain in alternate 4 and 3 stress, okay, lines. So stress, when stress is followed by, when an stressed syllable is followed by stressed one, that's called iambic. Okay, so when 4 iambs are there, that's called iambic tetrameter, and when 3 iambs are there, that's called iambic trimeter. So generally what we find, that ballad is a form of quatrain. Okay, ballad is a quatrain with alternative iambic tetrameter and iambic trimeter. Means, for example, when you have 2 or 3 stanzas, okay, So one stanza from four line, and their meter that you find is iambic tetrameter. When you go to the second stanza, what do you find? Iambic trimeter. Then again iambic tetrameter, iambic trimeter, and it goes on. Generally, that is the most basic form. Okay. And one more thing that you should remember here in that form, since that is a poem or the stanza of 4 lines, so generally you find that second and fourth lines have rhyming, and in that way, when you talk of rhyming pattern there, that is ABCB. Clear? ABCB. So as you find in ABCB, 2 B's are there, means second and fourth are in rhyming. So while talking of ballad stanza, we can take the example of one lyrical ballad, that is by S.T. Coleridge, the very famous poem by Coleridge, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. See how beautifully he uses ballad stanza, and that's why the Rime of Ancient Mariner is a ballad. Let's quote the poem. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of 3 by the long grey beard and glittering eye. Now wherefore stoppest thou me? So, as you have found, this is a stanza of 4 lines, that's a quatrain, and here you find the rhyming scheme. 2 words. Last word of the second line, that is 3, and the last word of the fourth line, that is me. So 3 and me are in rhyming. So a quatrain with pattern ABCB and in iambic tetrameter or iambic trimeter. Okay. Several examples that you find in literature, especially while talking of lyrical ballad, we will tell you that how this ballad form was very much appreciated and used by romantics like Coleridge, Wordsworth, Keats, and others. So one more beautiful example that we find from Keats is La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, a ballad. Okay. The Song of Wandering Angus by the last romantic. Who was the last romantic? Who declared himself to be the last romantic? It was William Butler Yeats, W.B. Yeats. So his poem, The Song of Wandering Agnes, was also a ballad. And who can forget this man, Edgar Allan Poe, a very famous writer of Gothic genre from United States of America, who can be considered as the father of Gothic genre, as well of short story writing. This was the man who made short story as short story. So Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. And this person who got for the first time Nobel Prize, the first person who got Nobel Prize in English literature in 1907, Rudyard Kipling. He wrote Ganga Din. That's in the form of ballad. Okay. Okay. Let's talk of more different forms of ballad. One is called Broadside Ballad, and the other one is called Literary Ballad. What is broadside? So you have to understand what is broadside actually. What is the meaning of broadside? That means one side of a single sheet. Okay, and that's why a ballad that was printed. See, it came in the form of printing. But how was it printed? A ballad that was printed on one side of a single sheet. So, not in the both sides, one side of the single sheet, and that one side is called broadside. So that's why this ballad is called Broadside Ballad. So Broadside Ballad is a ballad that was printed on one side of a single sheet, dealt with current event or person or issue. Okay, that's important. Current event or person or issue. See, as we talked of Biraha does not talk of only the stories from Mahabharata and Ramayana. It deals with several famous original, real stories, modern stories, current stories. Okay, you will find depiction of several murder cases in Biraha. Okay, so here we have Broadside Ballad. It deals with the current event or person or issue and was sung to a well-known tune. That's also important. A well-known tune. See, again, you can talk of Biraha. You'll find, in Biraha, the tune is set sometimes on the, basis of some other famous tune. As you know, while listening, you'll find they say, "Tarz kya hai, master?" And in that tarz, they talk of some very famous line of a song, and they take it and they use it in their manner for their concern, for making their own tune. Beginning with the 16th century, these broadsides were hawked in the streets. Hawked. What is the meaning of hawked? Are you aware of the term hawker? The person who sells the things by moving from here to there. Pheriwala. Okay. So these broadsides were hawked in the streets or country fairs in Great Britain. And what was the timing? 16th century. Since the press was introduced in 1476, so printing was there in huge amount. So ballads from its oral tradition came into print tradition. Okay, and it got its very beautiful form in lyrical ballads. Does it remind you something? Are you aware of the term lyrical ballad? Is there the name of any work as lyrical ballad? Oh yes. Something which is called the Manifesto of Romantic Revival, published in 1798. Lyrical ballad, which has the collection of poems by S.T. Coleridge and William Wordsworth. So, whenever we talk of literary ballad, we cannot forget the romantics. Okay. What is literary ballad? A narrative poem written in deliberate imitation of the form, language, and spirit of the traditional ballad. So what is the difference? The difference is traditional ballad was not written, okay? When traditional ballad were written, it was known as lyrical ballad, literary ballad, okay? Not the difference. The difference is just in the tradition. From oral tradition, when it came to literary tradition, in writing tradition. See, a narrative poem written in deliberate imitation, so a kind of imitation, and it was deliberately of the form, language, and spirit of the traditional ballad. Okay. In the beginning of that lyrical ballad published by Wordsworth and Coleridge, there we find one ballad by Wordsworth, and that is "We Are Seven." And I think, no, I don't think. M.H. Abraham thinks that perhaps that was the reason behind putting the name of the collection as Lyrical Ballad. In other examples, we can talk of a very famous German poem from G.A. Berger, and the name of the poem is Lenore. Okay, and don't be confused with another poem, Lenore, by Edgar Allan Poe also. So Lenore by G.A. Berger. And then we have Walter Scott. His Proud Maisie, Proudmaisie, Maisie is also one more example of lyrical ballad. I hope now you are aware of the term ballad, and in ballad especially folk ballad or popular ballad, and how it came into the print for the first time in the form of Broadside Ballad in the 16th century, and how in the later period this, in the Romantic Revival, it got its another form, and that's called literary ballad. Okay, thank you.